Hello and welcome. I want to show you a bit of Anyland behind the scenes coding. So what you're seeing here is Unity, and if I hit play, I start Anyland. It will take a few seconds and I'm in the world. And usually doing debugging, programming, testing, I just move with WASD. And today I want to show you a bit of forum dialog code. So that would be the boards here, like the help thread remote control movables, for example. So we got a back button, we got a headline, we got the X, we got a custom dialog, we got a thread with some posts, we got a like button here, and so on and so forth. Let's jump to the C# code behind the scenes. So this is called forumdialog.cs, and it inherits from the dialog class, which handles all kinds of button creation stuff. So the specifics to the forum dialog are these properties. So we are on the first page of the forum dialog, which starts to count at 0. We have 14 threads per page, for example. Maximum number of pages for this specific thread isn't set yet, so it's at -1. And then we have a list which contains data of the structure forum thread data, and that's not set yet. We will load that soon. Then we have the forum rights. I can show you later what that is. And we have a back button and a forward button, which we declare in the scope because maybe they need to be refreshed or something. And then the dialog will start always with a start, and we are initting the game object. Unity calls this the game object, which is basically any type of object in the world, and in this case it will be the dialog itself. And then we have a nice little function to add the back button, to add the close button, and we also want to have a search icon button at the top. And since forum boards can have their custom created fundament of dialog, we check if we need to create one, or else we take the default one. So for example, let's jump to add dialog thing fundament if needed, and here I am in the function of the base class. So if we didn't add the fundament already for some reason, then basically we will load it by the ID of the object of the thing, and that would be done via the instantiate thing on dialog via cache function, which is part of a manager's structure. In this case it's the thing manager, which handles all kinds of thing creation stuff. We give it a context, which helps for debugging if anything goes wrong, like if the object isn't found, we want to know what was the called context where it's not found. Then we have the thing ID, which is just basically a long string which represents a unique identifier for this thing in the universe. So every creation you make has a unique identifier within the universe. We pass it the transform, which is just the object position rotation information. We say put this at 0 position for now, scale it at the default. Could actually write it like this, a bit nicer to read. And we are using a default rotation. And also if dialog color string is set to something, we will sort of switch the whole theme of the dialog into a certain color scheme, like the text color might need to be white instead of black if it's a black background, so that there's contrast. So when we did all that, we just set this boolean to true and we're done. And let's go back to the forum dialog here. And we have another manager, it's called the forum manager, and it manages all the forum boards, like reading of threads, posting of comments, and so on. And we want to get a forum by the current forum ID, which is sort of the same for a bunch of dialogues and subdialogues, so we set it on a more global level. And here's a couple of parameters we get back, and if nothing failed, if everything went alright, and if we are still if we still have the current dialog open and it's not closed in the meantime, then we can continue here we will now set the rights for this forum. And what are the forum rights? I can show you the class for that. The forum rights you can see here. So we want to know if the person who opens it is the moderator. And then we have sort of several levels. First level is only moderators can add threads. The second level is only moderators can add comments, plus all above. And the third is only moderators can read, plus all above. So these are kind of the security levels. And here's a little comment on how to test this as well. And then we, based on those different rights, display the threads. So we have a sort of display of the pages. So if there's more than one page, we want to also have a back button and a forward button at the bottom. And we have a nice little function called add model button, and the button type or theme is called button back, which is basically a little triangle pointing to the left. And we want to connect this to the function previous page. We don't have any specifics to pass to that trigger, but we have the x position -100 and the y position, which is 900. And this is later translated into three-dimensional other kind of float variable, but for ease of use of setting it up, these are just integers here. And let's see what does previous page do. I just search for it and we see it decrements the page int, and then it will add the forum threads again. Let's see what is adding the forum threads list. That would be this. First of all, we're getting a so-called UI wrapper, which is part of the dialog system, which means sort of a rectangle within the dialog, which is useful, for instance, if I want to delete certain parts of the dialog but not other parts, or if I want to have one dialog section which is completely on the backside of the dialog. So in that case I would say something like backside wrapper get UI wrapper, and then later I would say something like backside wrapper rotate, and then everything that I added in between here would be added to the backside at once. In this case, the wrapper is just named wrapper. It's kind of like a default name, and then I'm setting the reference to that wrapper, and everything that I add below is now part of that little, inside that little rectangle. So in this case, what are we doing here? We're first checking what numbers do we want to page through. So the starting comment would be the current page times the threads per page, which is the 14 above, you can see here. And then this goes up to either the current starting position plus the threads per page -1, or the threads count, whichever is smaller, so that we don't exceed the number of available comments. And then we iterate through that using a for loop. And if you know any programming language or C# in particular, you know these kind of loops. We're starting with min I, then this is the condition for the loop, which means iterate the I until it hits max I, and this just means I++ iterate by 1. Then we set the thread to that comment, and then we do a bunch of stuff here, like we truncate the title to 40 characters max, so it will display nicely. Maybe there's a title clarification added, then we put that next to the title. It could be, for example, that the moderator of a board has a user who created the help thread named help me, and since that is not very specific, the moderator can now add the clarification like help me save a creation or something like that. And then everybody understands the thread better before clicking. And then we are adding some buttons here, and we're also adding the label for the comment itself. We're getting some information on how long ago this was written, and we're formatting this to our standards. And we're limiting to 20 characters here again, and then we're jumping to the next row, and finally we are sort of releasing the UI wrapper again and setting it to the base object again. And that's one of the more complicated dialogues here. A simpler dialogue could just consist of, let's say, add button, add close button, and maybe a label or two. Let's say, for example, we want to add a button here. This would be the add button function, and return means just cancel everything that follows for demonstration purposes here. And maybe the button does play sound. I just sort of invented that name on the spot because that's expressing what it needs to do. There's no specifics for it to pass. And then we have a name, a label, which would be play sound. That would be the verbose way to put it. And then we have a type of a button, and we just use the default, which is named button. There's also like button small, button compact, button long, all kinds of basic themes which come with icons and specific sizes and everything like that. And then we use the XY. For the X we just use maybe 0, for the Y maybe something like 200. Let me save this and go back to the editor, and I've wired up F5 to execute. So we're waiting now, and it's starting, and if there's any error it would show here. There's no error apparently. I hit W to get into desktop mode again. I click on boards, I click on help, and instead of a thread we are seeing a play sound button. And you can see there's some room for an icon, but I didn't actually set an icon. I could have, but I didn't. If I click it, the functionality is already there. It will highlight and stuff like that, but it doesn't actually do any sound playing. How do we add that? We just memorize what we called our little command here, and then at the end of every forum, of every dialogue, there's a little switch case, and we just add it here, and we say managers, sound manager play success, for example, and we want to play it at the current position, which is this transform, and this is the volume from 0 to 1, and we hit F5 again, and let's see if that works. And we're in Anyland again. I go to the dialogue, and you can hear a little success ding. We have a couple of default sounds like clone, pick up, put down, stuff like that, which are useful in all kinds of situations. And then we have another manager which is called Sound Library Manager, and it manages the several hundred sounds that you can use in your creations. But these are specific to sort of internal stuff in the program. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little peek behind the scenes, and I will see you in the next tutorial, or if you like this type of video, let me know, and I can maybe do another one. Okay, bye bye. Oh, PS. I was asked what editor I'm using, and I have to admit I like it very simple, black on white, and no toolbars and no nothing somehow that helps me to focus. So I'm actually using something called Notepad 2. I used to use my own sort of self-made text editor, but it was becoming too outdated, so I switched to Notepad 2. And I actually only miss autocompletion for obvious reasons. Autocompletion means that when I do something like add button, I do get all the completions sort of in predictive writing, so I can just pick. On the other hand, I also like to memorize all the functions. I guess this helps me to think about the code structure and sort of debug in dreams while I'm not on the computer. Okay, bye bye.